And we are live. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to a special edition of the OSR Tabletop with GM Bloodworth. So you'll notice that I have made the change over to GM from DM, and I'll go into several reasons why that occurred. DM is very specific to running a Dungeons and Dragons game, and even though that is my primary game that I'm running right now, I'm running a D&D First Edition. Have been for now. Our 75th week is now behind us. We are really dedicated. My group of 8 players and myself are very dedicated to Advanced Dungeons and Dragons First Edition. Absolutely love it. That is my favorite edition of Dungeons and Dragons. I also run other game systems, and so it is probably more accurate to put myself out there as Game Master Bloodworth because I Dungeon Master AD&D First Edition. I Game Master Vigilante City. I have been the Castle Keeper for Castles and Crusades. I've been a Myth Master for Mythvarog. I've been a Game Master for Star Frontiers and Gangbusters, and a Keeper for Call of Cthulhu. All of these different titles for the referee or runner of the game. I have worn that hat for over 4 decades. So Game Master is a little bit more universal, considering my experience and my taste in gaming. So that's the first thing. Now, let's take a look at Wizards of the Coast, and I know it's a title that's controversial, or it will spark some emotion behind it. But I really do believe that Wizards of the Coast OGL 1.1 is stepping into a pile of shit, and it was unnecessary, and it's something that they cannot roll back. Now, I was just checking Twitter, and I saw that D&D Beyond at some point today is going to release an announcement concerning 1.1, and we can see it. Unfortunately, it's not happening now, so I couldn't even open it up, and I don't have true confirmation of it. I just see that people are tweeting that D&D Beyond has been chosen to be the mouthpiece in this situation, considering that they're a former third-party website that wouldn't have existed without the OGL 1.0A. It's kind of funny. It's ironic that they would choose a former third-party contributor to be the mouthpiece for whatever they're going to say at this point. Originally, all that D&D Beyond had stated was, we know that you have questions about the OGL, and we'll be sharing more soon. That was back on January 10th, so over 2 days ago. So let's see. It's supposedly supposedly at 3 p.m. So I'm not going to do a follow up of this live stream unless it's really, really important. And yes, I know that Matt Finch made a great video. There have been so many great videos, and I wanted to bring that up and talk about the real step in shit that this was, and I have only come across one individual channel on YouTube that actually supports this move, and it's just bizarre to me that anyone could look at this and say, wow, this is a positive. It is not a positive for Wizards of the Coast or Hasbro in more broadly. And it was not a step initially for the positive of the hobby itself, but I believe it has turned into a positive. And I am going to touch on that. Again, my opinion, but I think it's really playing out. So let's talk about some of the website. I counted at least half a dozen YouTube channels that have over 100,000 subscribers that were adamantly opposed to this thing, said it was a real, a real terrible thing to do. All kinds of things attached to it, unfair. Others had said it violates the old rules, of the OGL. It's not an open, 1.1 is by any definition not an open gaming license. It's far too restrictive, and it strips away all kinds of rights that you would have as a creator if you opted into that. And that's why the response has been so negative. I don't think very many people were begrudging Hasbro to monetize their IP that they own in any way that they see fit, as it relates to proactively producing a product and then letting the market decide if people would buy into it. So I have no objection at all to them creating a 6th edition VTT, and with all of its microtransactions and subscription-based model and the hybrid model, and even created into the equivalent of a multiplayer role-playing game on a virtual tabletop, and then having to buy the various assets and everything that you would bring into that virtual tabletop, and having people pay voluntarily every step of the way. And if you chose not to engage in that, you chose not to back that, well, that's entirely up to you. You can always go back and play 5e the way that you always had been, or go back to any other, OSR indie game or older edition of Dungeons and Dragons and just go along your merry way without having to buy into it. They must have, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro must have so little confidence, in that business model actually being successful, that they're going to try to destroy everything that led up to this, to leave people with no other means to go forward, and no place to fall back on. And that's where I think that they took this misstep, and that's where I think that they did not understand. And when I say they, I'm talking about the former Microsoft execs that came into both Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, and they're looking at this as a business model that's a video game microtransactions business model, not understanding, because they're not tabletop roleplay gamers, not understanding that the culture that they developed around their game is not, and it's always been kind of that culture around tabletop role-playing, is that you really only have one player at the table that is generally buying things, and that is the game master or the dungeon master, whatever you want to call the title of the person. And that's always been the case. And you're not going to then be able to open it up, and 5e largely has a demographic that is younger than the OSR and indie games, and it is younger certainly than old school players. And so you're targeting a demographic of players that don't have a lot of disposable income. They're usually high teens to early 20s, mid 20s, and the drop off, I've seen these stats before, the demographics over these last couple of years, the drop off for 5e at 35 and older is tremendous. All right. Whereas the pickup in demographics, the population number playing OSR games actually explodes, because that was our gaming experience. That was our gaming time frame. And we happen to be the ones with the disposable income. And in many cases, like retirees such as myself and probably many, many others, we actually have the disposable time to dedicate to playing a variety of different things and not just one game system. And I don't think that Cynthia Williams or Rollins, the other D&D head, vice president, they don't have that experience. They're used to, people playing video games and being willing to pay microtransactions. I mean, I play Starfleet Command on my iPad, and I easily pay $20 a month to just give myself some different advantages, mostly harvesting and stuff like that, to kind of keep track of and keep ahead of having to gather all those resources and everything, and I don't mind paying $20 a month to do it. I wouldn't mind paying $20 a month to play a D&D video game that, that was voluntary for me, I've voluntarily chosen for me to play. But this 1.1 isn't doing that. It is basically threatening move or die kind of experience. And I've heard, that one channel was like, applauding it. Oh, great. All these, all the grognards are going to leave. All these game companies are going to leave. I don't think that Wizards of the Coast expected all of these channels that have 100,000 plus subscribers that have been giving Wizards of the Coast and 5e in particular free advertising and really spreading their name out there. I don't think that they expected this many channels, which might not have any stake in 1.1 at all, coming out and rolling out this hard against it. All right, and then I will get to the gaming companies, the actual publishers, after I start taking a look at some of the comments here, because I am falling behind on comments. Yes, the mask off of WotC has been being lawful evil. I don't know if they're quite lawful, if they're willing to violate rules and such, but yes, they're certainly evil, or I mean, it's closer to chaotic stupid than lawful evil. But yes, I agree that it's certainly a dick move that they're doing here. Well worth watching, Matt Finch. Yes, I think I had that up already. Let's see. So yeah, I hear 3 o'clock Eastern time. So I will definitely be checking that out and seeing what actually drops. And I probably will do a follow-up video on that to see. Let's see. Really bizarre. It gets any likes. What has done? Yeah, it really is. It's strange. Well, no, you know what? It's not that bizarre. They did the same thing with 4.0. When they created a different licensing for it. It wasn't an open game license. It was a GCL, I believe. It was a closed license. You had to, and nobody bought into it. And that's one of the reasons why 4E failed, was because there was no third-party support for it. And it was done when basically Lorraine Williams ran the company into the ground, and she, created a whole, she had the, TSR create a whole bunch of pablum that no one really was interested in buying. And back then, the retail stores could send the unsold product back for reimbursement, and that's what made TSR go bankrupt. So you had another person with no real understanding of the of the tabletop role playing hobby and business, and just kind of ramrodding this kind of nonsense down on the consumers, and the consumers go, I'm not buying this crap, so that's what really forced them into bankruptcy, and that's what forced them to sell the name Dungeons and Dragons to Wizards of the Coast at that point. So this kind of thing has happened a few times now. This is really the third time, and I think it is going to create that kind of flipping of the market share, and that remains to be seen. That's my prediction, is that they're going to find themselves on the opposite side of 50% after this. Having your own SRDs and OGL is a wise move forward. Already sharing and posting ideas, wretched crew. Yes. So, and that's what a lot of the publishers are doing right now. I'll talk a little bit about the publishers so far. So Trollord Games came out very early on, and they said, well, they've always had their own game system, so that's not been an issue. I think they were more using the OGL 1.0 1.0A, because it was just kind of like a safety net, because TSR under Lorraine Williams was actually nicknamed what was it called? It was I forget what the T stands for, but sues regularly. Maybe it was like try suing regularly or something like that. But yeah, they were very litigious, and so 1.0A was kind of a safety net. But Trollord Games came out early on, if not maybe even the first of the big publishers, and they said, number one, we've had our own game system right from the get-go. Number two, there might have been some incidental SRD bleed over into their game system over the years, and so they're very confident that they can clean that up very quickly, and then they're going to release their own OGL, which is going to be truly open, and it is going to include two terms: irrevocable and royalty free. All right. And then I had put in a tweet saying, like, originally when I read the guidelines for writing for, as a third party publisher writing for Castles and Crusades, I thought that it was really onerous. Like, there was, formatting issues and, guidelines and typeset guidelines and how you had to write. And I was like, wow, this is really, really complex. So when I put the tweet in there and saying, like, hopefully you can take a look at your guidelines, and they put up, I believe they put up a little caption ahead of that information, ahead of those PDFs that you could download, that basically said that was really for their internal writers more so, and that we can choose to follow those guidelines or not. That was more for internal use. So really good to see that Trollord Games, Castles and Crusades, which is my favorite non-D&D game, really see where they took that step right away. Cold World Press just made an announcement that they are going to drop the OGL from WotC altogether and create their own system and and put out their own products. Now, that's a major blow to Wizards of the Coast because Kobold Press has been producing some of the highest quality 4-5e products, across the board. They're the most well known for it. Their products exceed the quality and value of anything that Wizards of the Coast was producing. And for those out there that'll claim that, oh, the OSR only produces, pamphlets and they only produce black and white art and everything like that, that doesn't apply to Kobold Press. That doesn't apply to indie publishers such as Free League or Modifius or anything. That is just really one individual crying tears that Wizards of the Coast is going to slip, and just being protective of his sycophantry of it. So let's move on. Let's see, what is it true Hasbro has been ignoring D&D until someone pointed out the profits it was making and then found, well, you know what I think really triggered them? I think two things triggered them. I think that new TSR certainly what was projecting to put out content that they didn't want associated with even the TSR logo. And so that was one thing. And the other thing that I think really triggered them into looking at this and saying, hey, we're not, and you look at, they're not just talking about tabletop role-playing, products. They're talking about cosplay. They're talking about Twitch streams. They're talking about that. When it was announced that Critical Role made something like $20 million from Twitch streaming, and they made $10 or $12 million on their Kickstarter, not to mention what they make from whether it be YouTube or anything else. They're probably sitting there and saying, wait a second, Critical Role, and I think they're wrongly thinking this, Critical Role is making this money off our backs without realizing it or understanding it or acknowledging it if they do realize it and understand it. Critical Role, in my opinion, has been carrying 5e for 5 years. Without Critical Role's influence and spreading the word out on Dungeons and Dragons, 5e wouldn't be where it is right now. Dungeons and Dragons wouldn't have above the 50% share, right now. In my opinion, I don't think that they would. I think Critical Role has been carrying 5e for these past 5 years, ever since they have been, super popular over the last, let's say, 3 to 5 years. They've been carrying the weight, not otherwise. Two of the best books created under Wizards of the Coast banner were written by Matt Mercer. All right. And not by their own in-house people. Most of the stuff that Wizards of the Coast has produced since 2019 has been garbage, with very few exceptions in between. It's just been, it's been reviewed very poorly. It's undersold, and it's been progressively getting worse. The only exceptions are those written by Matthew Mercer and some of the other writers. There were some decent stories here and there throughout some of the books, but for the most part, they've been garbage and they haven't sold. So I think that that's what really triggered them, was that they were seeing that the quality is better outside of Wizards of the Coast. And, and these people don't want, these former Microsoft execs don't want the tabletop role-playing element of Wizards of the Coast tainting or harming the other divisions that Hasbro is hoping to monetize D&D for. Yes, they only care about the digital components of Wizard of. They do not care at all about tabletop role-playing games, including their own. And I fully expect them to move to if it's successful, to move away from print completely. Whether that happens in 2024 or it happens in 2027, because I know the OGGM keeps on talking about, he is a shareholder of Hasbro, and he keeps on saying that on their projected calendar in 2027, there is D&D 6X, whatever that is going to mean. And there is something planned for 2027. Now, I know from their CEO conference with the open conference that they had a couple months ago, Cynthia Williams had mentioned that by 2027, she expects D&D Beyond and their VTT to have 50 million subscribers. All right. And that is not something where they can spend their time catering to the handful of people that might buy a hardbound, paperback, a hardbound book, when they really want all the action taking place on the subscription-based microtransaction VTT. The hardcover book does nothing for that aspect of their game. Other companies like Paizo put out player's guides to adventures. WotC used to do player guides in the realms. Current WotC lacks creative talent to do anything, to do any of those things. No, because they don't write their own. They don't write their own adventures. They're farming it all out. And they're depending on. They've been relying on third-party creators like Kobold Press. I'm sorry, like Frog God Games. Like Matt Koval's production. I don't know what his publishing company is. It's the initials, MCDM or something like that. All of those companies have been producing the adventures for 5e. And if you look at Drive-Thru RPG, I mean, that's what you'll see. You'll see 5e or 4-5e or for use with 5e or any of those things. You're going to see all of that disappear. Possibly by tomorrow, because that's the date that they said, the 13th was the date that this is supposed to kick off. And they had until tomorrow to sign on to 1.1. And I haven't heard a single company say that they're signing on to 1.1 because they would be stupid to do so. They're giving up all their rights for their own product if they had done so. All right. File the serial numbers and you're good to go. Yes, you don't need the license. Kevin Crawford never used the original Smart Fellow. Yes, and there's others like Questing Beast came out last week or possibly even the week before and said you really don't need the OGL at all. It's just a safety net so that if they ever got the inkling to sue you, you'd have that to fall back on as long as you stayed within those parameters. These new parameters are set up for 1.1 are set up for you not to sign it. They really don't want anybody to sign it. That's why they made the terms of it so egregious that nobody would in their right mind sign that thing. And I know that there's like a hope, because Critical Role has been silent on this subject, that Critical Role is going to get some side deal, some special deal. How bad is that going to make Critical Role and Wizards of the Coast if they did that? All right. It makes Critical Role look like a sellout, and it makes Wizards of the Coast appear, and I think it's true, but it makes them appear that they need Critical Role so much that they're willing to cut them a deal or just absolve them of having to follow any aspect of 1.1. All right. And I think that that's, if it does occur, that's the true case behind it, is that Wizards of the Coast knows that they do not survive without Critical Role's numbers and their appeal and their bringing attention to the D&D brand. All right, without Critical Role, D&D 5th edition may have very well died years ago. All right, fallen below the 50% market share, and they might have been looking to, hey, we have to do something else at this point. Develop some of our older IPs to help fill it in, or to do something else entirely. So I just think that it would be a bad move on both cases. And just look at I looked at some of the websites out there, or the YouTube channels out there, and it is channel after channel after channel with 100,000 plus subscribers that either haven't put out a video in weeks, such as like Ginny D's hasn't put out a video in 3 weeks' time, considering all of this stuff happening. She have 455,000 subscribers, not a word. All right. Asmongold, who I'm not really that familiar with, he's more of a Twitch streamer and a video gamer and everything, but highly critical of this move. And on YouTube, not even his primary channel, but with 1.69 subscribers, 1.69 million subscribers, all right, is saying this is a trash move. All right. And then I can go on and on and on. Dungeon Craft saying he's going to, kind of phase out. And he actually literally said, I'm not going to cover one D&D until it's released. So he's moving on from it. Nerd Immersion on the precipice of just saying, like, just so distraught over this, so, upset by this, really dickish move that, he with 101,000 subscribers. Questing Beast had mentioned that, hey, I might have to reconsider what I'm doing moving forward. Dave Tomavor, can't say his name, sorry, 20,000 subscribers, but still said, I'm done. All right. These are all free advertisements for Wizards of the Coast. All right. And with thousands of viewers, or tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of viewers. Now, I know some of that's going to be crossover. Some people follow all of these channels, and so you do have some crossover, but it's moving into other places. Clownfish TV, 286,000 subscribers. They usually talk about political stuff and comics and other stuff, but even they had picked up on this and said, this is just a really bad look for Wizards of the Coast to do this. Crit Crab, 310,000, same thing. Very, very critical of this. DM's Lair, 124,000. All of these different YouTubers out there. And I'm just focusing on the large ones. I'm not even talking about the ones with 10,000 or less that are also saying, I'm moving on, I'm not touching this anymore. All right. So it's tremendous. All right. And then the companies, I'll spend a little time again with the companies. Troll Lord Games, Cobalt Press, Paizo has come out and said that they are going to, make a clean break from the OGL altogether. They don't believe that they need to actually use it, or they're at least willing to accept, hey, let's have this fight in court. And many people much brighter than myself, lawyers themselves in other, on other channels, on other streams and such, have come out and said that, and this is very highlighted on Tankar's Tavern, Wizards of the Coast doesn't want this to go to court. because they run the risk of losing in court. And if they lose in court, then it's a done issue. All right. They have nothing to fall back on. They cannot sue you over game mechanics. They lost that court case back in the day, or TRS did. I think it was Wizards of the Coast by that point. They lost that already. If they lose any other aspect of it, even a step further, if they lose portions of the SRD, I'd say, hey, you know what? This is now common usage because it's been used throughout. Let's say like the DM label has been so common usage since 1974 that you've lost the ability to copyright that. I mean, it's always a possibility that if it does go to court, you're going to get a ruling that you don't want to happen. They want to bully people away from actually challenging them, and it's backfired. Clearly, it's backfired. Let's move on. It's that they want D&D to be Fortnite. Yes, they want microtransactions, which I don't begrudge them. It's like, make your video game, convert your new edition of Dungeons and Dragons to something that is completely played on a computer screen, on a virtual tabletop, and with all of your PDFs being directly ported over into it. If they're bought on your hub and all of that, but all of that is voluntary for people to step into. It doesn't force people who want to continue playing 5e or earlier, who want to continue having materials made for them, not from the company that owns the IP, but from third-party creators, that, it's voluntary. It leaves the choice up to the consumer. This is trying to say, not if you don't buy into this as a consumer, then we're also going to deny you that you've had open to you for the last 23 years. All right. It's just not the way that a business endears itself with its player base or its customer. All right. And the timing of this is really, really foolish, because they have a movie that I'm guessing they put at least 100 million into creating, and probably usually like 2 or 3 times that amount in advertising. And they're doing this now 2.5, 3 months before its theatrical, premiere. This is going to have a huge impact on ticket sales at the box office, and I certainly hope it does. I am hoping that the movie tanks, all right, and it sends the message to Hasbro and to Wizards of the Coast, and they're going to try to blame it on whatever new company picks up, because they tried to sell off the movie and their entire entertainment division, probably because they see that the movie's going to be a turd to begin with. But now they've certainly sealed the deal that it's not going to have very good viewership, and I hope it doesn't. I hope that it is under $10 million opening weekend. That's my personal wish for it. That is under 10 million, and it falls within one of the top the top 10 worst opening weekends of all time. So I think it has to be under 5 million to be like really in the top 5 lowest, but anything under 10 would be awesome. Unsubscribe from, and that's the other thing. They're going to start to see people unsubscribing from it. They're going to start to see the visibility of 5e disappear. All right. And that's all been free advertising for the last 7 years. All right. So that's going to vanish, poof, disappear. It's exactly what they were facing with 4th edition, because they had no OGL for 4th edition that was accessible. It wasn't an open gaming license, and nobody did it. and this is what they're pushing for 1.1, but they're retroactively applying it to previously. So, people are looking at what they have currently on what they have currently on One Bookshelf and on Drive Through RPG. I think that they have to start looking at Roll20 and saying, hey, wait a second, maybe I need to pull some things off of Roll20 as well. And it's going to make 5e disappear from people's vision. All right. And while they're trying to build this up, who's going to buy anything that they produce in 2023? I've heard that they have like 4 or 5 potential hardcovers that are due to come out in 2023. Why would you buy that? It's going to get zero support after you purchased it. Wizards of the Coast is not going to look to put anything into it after you've done it. So these people that have bought into, Dragonlance, that's a one and done. You bought Dragonlance, you're going to have to create everything going beyond that. They will never produce any other product for that Dragonlance thing. It is a one and done book. You might as well throw it on your shelf. Once you run it once, if you even bother to run it once, then it's going to sit there. You'll play the board game probably more so than you actually play the role-playing portion of that. And that's the thing. That's what they've been with all of their last 5 to 7 printings. That's what it's been. It's been like, I take this, I use it maybe, and then it sits on my shelf forever after that. That's what they produce. They produce stuff just for the sake of producing it. It's the splat book mentality that Lorraine Williams had. It's a splat book mentality that led to the decline, the decline of a 3rd edition or late 3rd edition or a 3.5 or whatever. When they bombarded again, they came up with 4 to try to tighten it up with no OGL, attached to that anybody was willing to use. And they're repeating history again, in my opinion. Yes, it reduces choice. Let's see. Facebook user, K. Crawford, is Simeon publishing Stars Without Numbers? Yes, and and that's another system. It's a great system that is very flexible. Worlds Without Number and Stars Without Number, and it can be. I believe he's working on another one. Currently it hasn't hit Kickstarter yet, but it'll be interesting to see. Let's see, Steps in Hard. All right, I'm just checking. I'm getting alerts when things hit on Twitter on my iPad, so I can check to see really fast. Let's see. I will dump. You see, I don't pay I don't pay for D&D Beyond anyway, but I will dump it just out of principle. I didn't even think about it because I never use it or very rarely use it. Yes, non-D&D, and I mentioned those. Asmongold, I don't consider to be a D&D. It's not a D&D channel, but it has 1.69 million followers on YouTube, which is their secondary channel over Twitch. So you have somebody with 1.69 million followers on his off channel, and D&D is not as focused, and he's talking about what a shitty thing this is. It's not good. Trent Monk is another one that I came across. 69,000 subscribers. Also said this is just a shit move. The companies I mentioned, right? Troll Lord Games, Kobold Press, Paizo, Frog God Games, Matt Kovold's game company, Foundry VTT came out with a statement about this as well. All right, and because they have D&D content on Foundry that has the 1.0A content, OGL, by that there, and I haven't torn through their whole statement on it, but yeah, the present. Imagine if the present VTTs, in the absence of WotC having their own VTT in place, say we have to remove all of the OGL 1.0A content from our, because we don't want to open ourselves up to a lawsuit. We don't want WotC to give us 30 days notice and then rescind that license and then demand 25% of our, it's not our profits, it's 25% of their revenue tied to those products, going back as far as they've been sitting on there. That's the kind of thing. And not only that, we now own everything to use for profit in any way we see fit. And your product, all right, now in our name, we don't even have to give you the recognition that you wrote it. All right, we now own it, and we can do with it whatever we want. No contract in the world has ever been written that way, with the intent of somebody actually signing it. You literally are signing away all of your rights when they do something like that. Absolutely insane that they thought, if they did think that was going to fly, I can't imagine that they actually thought that this would fly. They're just trying to put the fear tactic out there so that no one would challenge it. No one would stand up to it. No one would ever want to go to court over it, because it would cost them a fortune if they did. And it's just a bully tactic that they were working on, and it appears that it has backfired. They cannot be happy with the pushback that they've been getting, and that's probably why they've been silent. They can fall back and say, "Oh, well, this was just a draft. It's 20 pages long." All right. They can't step away. They can't walk it back either. They can't say, "Oh, well, we see that you're upset about this. We're going to change some aspect." No, you already rung the bell. You cannot unring the bell. And the bell toll was that you cannot be trusted. All right. And no one in their right mind is going to want to do business with you. It's unfortunate that some of the biggest names, all right, in our hobby is still quiet on this. I mean, are they debating whether or not going to sign it? I guess we'll find out by tomorrow if they signed on to this. But I haven't come across a single company that has signed on to this. I haven't come across any reasonable YouTube creator that has said, "Hey, this is a fine thing." Let's see. We have to wonder what violates monopoly clauses, since it's trying to hurt Foundry. So you need one D&D to play 6e online. Yeah, like I said, it's there's not a problem if Foundry just says, "All right, we're going to drop all D&D from us." All right, and we're going to open it up for everybody else. And then WotC can't touch them. All right, that's fine. If that's the case, and that means 6e will be the only place that you could, the VTT for 6e will be the only place that you can go to play that, and they're not going to get the numbers that they're thinking, because their demographic doesn't have disposable income. Their demographic is used to playing with only one person having bought the product. All right, and even in a lot of cases, that's photocopied from somebody else who bought the product, and they pool their resources, and they're not used to spending the money on it. They're used to this being a free, very casual hobby and they don't have that much time vested into it, and they certainly don't have money vested into it. I'm still way far behind, so nobody's going anywhere. They will just move on. What's your thoughts on Hasbro has been? What's your thoughts on Hasbro has been backtracking? I'm not sure I understand that. Nobody's going anywhere? No, people are leaving. Yeah, people are definitely leaving, and Hasbro won't be able to backtrack. Yes, and Dunk Sal, I never said that all. I never talk in absolutes. Yeah, 5e gamers, or modern gamers, younger gamers are looking at this, and they recognize a shit move just as easily as anybody else. I mean, they're looking at this and they're saying, wait a second. The modern gamer, the younger gamer right now, you are being told that you're going to have to pay a subscription for what you used to be able to do for free. You're being told that if you want your character to look the way that you want your character to look, you're going to have to pay microtransactions for your hair color, your hairstyle, your species, skin, your, for some of your special features, for what they can keep on building on it. You are essentially playing, the Dungeons and Dragons Fortnite, and in order to maintain keeping up with everybody else, you're going to have to pay a subscription amount, or you're going to have to keep on dropping those, $2 here, $5 there, in order to keep up with it. I'm telling you, I am playing Star Trek Fleet Command. All right, I am dropping $20 a month. All right, just to keep up with, what the rest of my group, all right, is doing in there, just to keep on advancing, my gameplay as far as having the ships that I need with the fittings that I need and the officers that I need and everything else. And I'm willing to pay that. All right. But I knew that coming in. All right. What they're doing is they're saying, well, you've been playing this for a while now. If you want to continue now, all of a sudden, you are going to have to come in here. Will they have a free to play mode? Yes, they probably will. And you're going to see that your character is the gray glob of goo, with no features to it, no anything to it, not the junk equipment, and no one is going to want to join up with you in that circumstance because you won't be as effective in the party as somebody who's paying $12 a month and has spent $150 on gear. That's what they're looking to do, because that is the video game mentality that their CEO and the lead for the vice presidential lead for Dungeons and Dragons have come into from Microsoft. Yes, there's that nuance between irrevocable and in perpetuity. If they want to split that hair, but if it goes in front of a judge, this is tort law. And the one thing I know about tort law is it uses a reasonable person standard. So what would a reasonable person believe the OGL 1.0A means by saying in perpetuity, all right, as opposed to what it means when someone says irrevocable. If a judge says the reasonable person would believe that in perpetuity means forever. All right. And so that's the risk that that Wizards of the Coast faces if it does go to a judge. Yes, it is. It is definitely repeating itself. And Trollor Games actually said it feels like it's 2000 again, because they're optimistic about what is going to happen, and I want to be optimistic as well as it relates to, you know, third-party creators, the OSR and the independent gamers out there. If they can be agile enough to shift away from the OGL that WotC has tainted and move forward with their own, or I've heard some chatter that several are coming together to create a very common, you know, OGL across many different systems and everything, kind of pool their resources and say, hey, we're going to all adopt this new OGL that is a true open gaming license that will have irrevocable written into it, that will have duty-free or royalty-free, that will have the clause written in there that no matter what, you always own your own creation. All right. And by opting into this, you might be owning, like loaning your product. But if at any time either party says we're separating this, you still retain what you created yourself. All right. That's what hopefully they're going to actually produce. And it won't matter how Hasbro backtracks on 1.1. Again, that bell has already been rung, and no one trusts them, or nobody in their right mind trusts them. And it's going to move forward. And I do think it's going to be a net positive for the hobby that Wizards of the Coast stepped into this pile of shit, because they're ultimately going to pay for it. I've never considered them to be a good steward of the Dungeons and Dragons IP to begin with. So I'm laying it out there. That's my bias already laid out on the table. But you know, if they did have a product that I enjoyed playing, I would play it. Like, I enjoyed Sword Coast Legends. You know, I thought it had a lot of potential, and of course, Wizards of the Coast could not back up that potential. They couldn't keep on developing it because they produce something and then they drop it. All right, and that's their modus operandi now. You know, they'll pick up something, they'll do it, they'll produce it, and they'll drop it. If you sign at 1.1, they're going to pick up your product, let you produce under it. All right, then give you that 30 days notice and then drop it. They'll stop you from being able to sell it. They will stop selling it too. They will shelve it like they've shelved all of their other TSR IPs. All right, they're going to take your product that might have been successful, might have been better than anything they could have produced themselves, probably would have been, and they'll shelve it forever and nobody will be able to use it. All right, that's what their intention is. Their intention is to destroy the rest of the tabletop hobby and just leaving one D&D in its place. Yes, because there isn't only one Paizo out there anymore, and Hasbro or Wizards of the Coast has relied on all these other companies to create content and advertising for their D&D 5e. It hasn't It's been a mutually beneficial back and forth. But if you compare what all of these other companies have been producing, and then you compare that to what Wizards of the Coast has been producing in-house, and do a side-by-side comparison, there's no comparison between the two of them. All right. It has been better, more innovative coming out of the OSR and the indie game industry than it has been Wizards of the Coast. They are the height of the lazy writer. They're just not producing the same level. And that's why their most successful books have all been outsourced and written by Matt Mercer. All right. That's the bottom line, is that they can't rely on their own staff writers to produce high quality stuff. And now they're trying to burn that bridge and trying to make it sound like, oh, well, they needed us more than, well, we don't need them. They needed us. Well, now they're finding out that the OSR and the indie game companies are realizing, hey, wait a second, we really didn't need the OGL. All we have to do is tweak a few things. I mean, if it only comes down to just a couple name changes, and they're using their own systems, or you can't copyright system, then they can move forward. And none of the systems, I know one individual has argued, oh, well, they've been using Wizards of the Coast system. Even under the old OGL, you still had to modify the system slightly. Even though it couldn't be, it could be copied straight up, same system. You just couldn't, you couldn't present it the same way. You couldn't cut and paste, but you had to change the wording to it. You had to kind of make it your own in a certain way. But many of the game systems out there, what they did was, even if they are OSR, was that they tweaked the systems. They added their own little thing to it to make it different, and noticeably different in most cases from the original that they're copying from, whether they were copying from OD&D or they're copying from D&D BX or AD&D first edition, second edition, third, nobody copies fourth, or even fifth. They're still tweaking it along the way. All right, let's see. We will go to, you also write that other young people's discretionary income is limited. Yeah, I mean, it's not across the board, but most, yes. Most don't have the same spending ability. That this will hurt WotC, as paying $80 plus $40 for OSR books and Foundry is not cheap, not cheaper than $20 a month for WotC's VTT over time. Yeah. They sue regularly. Thank you. That's what it was. They sue regularly. I forget what it was. I originally forgot what it was. Anybody buffering issues, or is it just me? I hope not. It's live streaming, so it shouldn't have that issue, but I see a little shake in mine, so maybe it's maybe it is something overall. Can they buy Kobold Press entirely? Who, Wizards of the Coast? They would have to get Kobold Press to agree with it. I mean, they'd have to get Kobold Press to agree with it. I don't see them doing that. I mean, again, that would be a completely obvious show that they don't trust their own writing ability. They buy the company and they shut it down. Then they're going to bring those staff writers on. Yes. Yeah. I thought it was 20, but if it was 10 million, yeah, 10 million from there, 10 million from their Kickstarter. They made like 20 million in 1 year just from those two things. Not to mention what they make on their not to mention what they make on their YouTube side, and what they're making from their deals with Vox Machina and other merchandising and everything like that. I guarantee Critical Role probably makes about 60 million a year, which is more than what Wizards of the Coast makes from the TTRPG side of Dungeons and Dragons. All right. So when they say Dungeons and Dragons makes $100 to $150 million a year, they're including merchandising. They're including toys and T-shirts and other stuff. Even though I've never seen anybody wearing a D&D T-shirt, and I live in well-populated New York, and I don't see very many people wearing. I don't think I've ever seen anyone wearing a D&D T-shirt if I wasn't wearing it already. Yes, Jeff Talanian also came out and made a statement. Like I said, I couldn't compile because it's been flowing so fast. The number of companies coming out and saying, again, I have not seen a single company say we're signing on to 1.1. No one in their right mind would do that. 1.1 wasn't designed for anybody to agree to signing it, and that's what is the real shit move about it. It's really just designed to remove the old OGL and say, oh, well, we have something new in place, and we can update and replace an old OGL with a newer one and make the old one no longer authorized, which is the language that they're trying to use, because we've replaced it with a new one. And that's not going to fly. I think that it runs the risk, if it ever got into a court, and it's going to be a civil court, that the reasonable person standard will say that is not what a reasonable person would assume the original OGL in perpetuity means. And so I think they lose that case if they take it that far. Yeah, but you know what? Even if Talanian has to change the word from armor class to armor protection, then that's all you have to do. That's why when Troll Lord Games looked at it, they were like, there's so very little we actually have to do. They don't have to change their system at all. It's just nomenclature that has to change. It's not a big deal. And they will never in a court get it where you have to destroy your current product like 1.1 says. That will not fly anywhere. That they can force you to destroy current or past product that you're already sitting on. Yes, thank you very much, Web my head Mike. Yes, please like it. Gets it spread out there. Yes, and I marked that. That's why I believe that was 2019, and I think that's when 5e took a turn into the shitter. That's when it became not D&D anymore. And I think that certainly coincides around when Mike Merles was removed, and Perkins and Crawford took over. Once Mike Merles was removed, you had your connection to old school legacy Dungeons and Dragons stripped away. He was the last one that truly knew what playing old school Dungeons and Dragons was, because both Perkins and Crawford either only played 4 or certainly only ran 4, and still to this day I believe run 4th edition, but I think that they might have been 3rd edition or 3.5 moving forward, where Mike Merles, even though he's not much older than them, has a connection back to, I would say, probably like 2E or maybe even 1E. But he was definitely the last of the standard bearers of the legacy of Dungeons and Dragons, Mike Merles. Yeah, I was happy to create that one. You know, I was like, let me find the stepping in shit. I'm sure I'll get criticized that it's a woman stepping in shit, but okay, it is what it is. Yes, they have been. They've been pushing 5e more than Wizards of the Coast. Why does Wizards of the Coast doesn't have to? Wizards of the Coast doesn't even go to big conventions anymore. They don't feel that they need to because they have all these third-party creators pushing 5e stuff for them. So I think it was said that Wizards of the Coast stopped going to Gen Cons like 5 years ago or something like that. They just don't feel the need. Yes, it is. Right now, that's all that it's about. By force, if necessary. By shutting down others in order to force, if you want to stay in this hobby, they're going to drive people out of the hobby, which is unfortunate. And that's why I say to those that are saying, hey, I'm just not going to, I'm not going to move forward into this and I'm just going to leave the hobby behind. No, there's plenty of other game systems out there. There's plenty of other publishers out there that will treat you better, usually give you a cheaper access point into their game system, and you will have the same, if not a better experience playing their games. And talent. Dark Winter and talent. It takes time, work, and talent. Yes, I was thinking of that. James Kane, I was thinking of, in my mind, the most immediate and significant impact that we can dish out to them. And I wasn't thinking of the, unsubbing from D&D Beyond as an indicator as well. I was thinking about the movie. I was thinking about make this movie, at the very least, do not see this movie during the first 2 weeks of opening. Wait till it hits Netflix or whatever else, whatever streaming it's going to go to eventually. I saw one person saying, I'm just going to wait until and buy the DVD. Well, the DVD still puts money into their pocket that they can say, hey, this is our DVD sales. And they'll still include that in overall how well the movie did. If you're already paying for a streamer and it goes to that streamer, then by all means watch it. But if you really care about pushing this and pushing back on them, then at the very least, don't see it the first two opening. If it's first two opening weekends, it's opening weekend and then the following weekend, if it shows no movement, like it did terribly, then that sends such a severe message to them. It might actually just throw them off completely because they're counting on this movie to be kind of like, putting the flag on the moon, like we're going forward with this digital entertainment enterprise now, and it's going to give them a clear indication that they can further distance themselves from the tabletop role-playing facet of their IP. Yeah, I'd say. I mean, the only one that I heard anything really positive was Fizban's Fizban's Dragon book was actually pretty detailed. And I used to have Sword Coast, the Sword Coast Adventure Guide, and it was a good guide for that portion of Sword Coast Sword Coast, so it was a good source book. But the more modern stuff, like since Tasha's and forward, Tasha did too many rule changes that makes it not D&D. And then the others, this whole idea of, well, we're going to put an adventure and this and that and the other thing in it. It makes every single book only DM centric. And so only a DM would be allowed to buy this. And if everybody at the table had that book at the table, they all have access to the adventure that you're trying to run. It just doesn't make sense to do that. Yes, MCDM. Yeah, so I kind of put it together. That's Matt Koval, DM, I guess, and his production company. So we need the cast of involved for that to work. Or one that's similar. I'm sorry, I'm way behind on these, so I'm not sure how these are tying into my comments. Let me try to get caught up. This Kumbaya, an enemy of my enemy sentiment is touching, but if it comes out, it still smacks of DEI, intersectionality, false virtue, to comfort fraudulent ESG valuation. What have we been? Will have been one. That's a lot of buzzwords. So yeah. I think I will say this: they do have to make the third-party creators and the publishers and the independent publishers need to create a separation between what Wizards of the Coast is doing and what they produce, and it should have a different. It should definitely have a different, feel to it, a different tone to it, a different objective in many cases to it. Be more role-playing centric, true role-playing centric, or if it is a more tactical game, then make it clearly identifiable as, hey, this is a real, this is a game that's meant to be tactical and crunchy and everything, and put it out there like that, so like more genuine advertising of what your game is meant to do. I think that would be a benefit to these companies that are saying we're separating from the OGL. I don't want to just like have a company, or hope that companies don't just say we're separating from the OGL and leave it at that. I want them to say we separated from the OGL and this is what our game does better. All right. This is what's unique about our game. This is what you can expect if you're playing our game, and so on. So never just say I'm voting against something. Say I'm voting against it, and this is what I am voting for, and this is why I'm voting for this. This is the positive that I see on this end, as compared to what's going on over there. So always, my inclination is always, when I see a problem, I look to, propose a solution to it. When I see something I don't like, I point out that I don't like this. Then I say what I do like about something else, and I push for that something else. I give my reasons behind it. So all of these different game companies coming together and saying, we don't like this, and this is, and so this is why we're separating ourselves. Also put out there, this is why you should come to us. This is what we feel we do better, and push it that way as well. If that's kind of like what you're talking about, I will try to get caught up on comments. Let's see. And let's see, has been hearing the rumor of WotC responding to the outcry video today at 3 p.m. Yes, so that I've heard as well. So let's see what this is about. So on the contrary, it's not about winning in court. It's about embroiling your competition in legal fees to put them out of business. Well, yeah, they don't want it to go to court. They really don't want it to go to court because I think that they understand that they're most likely fail in court. And they only need to fail one case and it eliminates all the others. So yeah, I think that's the real thing. Recognize that they probably don't want this to go to court, and then just push back on them as much as you can. Yeah. So one bookshelf is a big question. Anyone heard anything from them via? No, I haven't heard from them, but like I said, Foundry VTT put out something already, and they let me see if I can pull that up really fast. Let's see. Let's see, Foundry VTT statement. So Foundry has stated that they might actually drop out of the OGL since it looks it won't be beneficial with the OGL 1.1. And this is directly from Foundry. We've been paying very close attention. We have an official statement to share, but we want to choose the right moment and add our voice to the conversation. Let's see if they've done anything since then. It's very telling because you know what? VTT retweeted Cobalt Press's statement. Foundry, they retweeted Low Fantasy's statement on it, and that includes like Basic Fantasy as well. Was another game company that stated something against it. They have not released their full. All right, here we go. Step one, don't panic. Your data, and this is from Foundry. Your data is probably not actually gone. Send us your customer. So, no, that's something else. So Foundry hasn't put out their statement yet, but they have been responding to and sharing or retweeting the various game companies that have already said they're not signing on. So that's what I have on that, at this very moment. Yeah, as soon as that drops too, probably end up dealing with that. Let's see. Wow. I'm going to try to just skim through. If some of yours I missed or we're backtracking, let me get to the most recent comment and see. All right, let's take this one from Germany. Hello, Germany. Belager, I guess. So a question for Germany. How great is D&D's percentage in the TTRPG market in the US? Right now, like the last time I saw it, it was at one point 59% in 2019 to 2020. And then it dropped to 53% just after that time frame. Obviously, it picked up dramatically during the initial year of COVID. I think you could say COVID now. So it did increase during the first year of the shutdowns and all of that, as did everyone across the entire hobby. And it was around 59%, and then it dropped down the last time I heard, and that was pre Q3 of last year, and that announcement, it dropped down to 53%, and that's why I said very early on in this live stream that they're probably aware that their ability to maintain that above the 50% is probably, is probably in the past. I don't think that I think that their Q4, if their Q3 failed, their Q4 is not going to pick up because they didn't produce anything in the last 4 months that was going to seal the deal for their Q4 being dramatically different than the $60 million loss that they had in Q3. Now, I know a lot of their loss is tied to Magic the Gathering, but a portion of that is also to Dungeons and Dragons, and I have a feeling it's mostly tied to their book sales not doing that well. They had the issues with Radiant Citadel was a turd, did nothing. Their Spelljammer had all kinds of controversy around it, unnecessary controversy around it, and the fact that it was not well received because it had not well reviewed because it was missing a major component of ship to ship combat, and so it was largely panned as being just lazy and poor writing and not very good, not useful. So that that was another dog of a thing. They had the controversy before Dragonlance released, and the fact that none of the original authors of Dragonlance have anything to do with the new Dragonlance book, I think is pretty much, it's dead on arrival in my mind. I can understand if people who have passed on have nothing to do with your product, but if the people are still actively writing for that world and yet they have nothing to do with what you're presenting of their work, it just looks bad. So I would say last time I saw it was around 53%, but that's going to change. I mean, I definitely, and this does not help it. So I think it's going to be below 50%. That's my estimate. $5E was an improvement on $4E, and that's about as much as you can probably say about it. And it has gotten worse from when it first released, starting with Tasha's and moving forward. So again, I'm biased. I've played it enough times to know that I really don't like the system. And even though I almost made an attempt to run it, after looking at it and just looking at the way that it was going to come together and everything, I was like, I couldn't do it. I just could not run it. I was just looking to run it from the Essentials kit, and just looking through that and the way it worked, I was like, this is just so boring to actually run that. So, and then that's considered to be one of their better products. So that goes to show you, it's just not that much there. So let's move on and see. Can anyone point to any racist or discriminatory content in the legacy products of 3PP stuff? I don't remember seeing anything. Now, you know what? It's all nonsense, John. It's all nonsense. There was no racist or discriminatory content in any legacy product related to Dungeons and Dragons. Just does not exist. I hope new game systems actually use armor reduction values instead of beat AC. I want to see armor do its job and absorb hits. Yes, and some do. Some actually do that. And the point is that some systems even have it where the armor's endurance degrades with every hit that it does absorb, a certain amount of damage and such, and so it becomes less effective over time. I don't mind a crunchy system that slows down the combat for meaningful things occurring in it. And then, if you're looking at all these things, but then the combat that does take place becomes the focus of the game session. And, I don't mind it being very detailed, like that kind of thing would be done. But, that does change the mindset that the players coming to the table need to have in order to get into it. And that's why I said earlier on, when you're creating a new system and everything, you're not going to just say, my system is better than that system. You have to explain why it is, and you have to explain what your system's intent is to do. If it's meant to be a crunchy, very realistic system, then let the players know that. And that way they know that they're kind of buying into it, and explain that combat in this might seem to be slow, but that's because it's meant to be very realistic. And how do you role play that? You're going to role play that cinematically, whether it be in your head or verbally with the other players at your table. And you're going to go into much more detail of that action taking place narratively as it's happening, even though it's really coming down to a numbers crunch as you're working it out. And you might only have one combat during a session now because of that level of detail. But I think if people know that that's what they're coming into and they're looking specifically for that, they're going to have a good time with it regardless. Yep, at its core, 5e is cool, except for the cantrips and the railing magic of any class, of every class. Doesn't virtually every class, all but 2 or 3 classes have magic? Yeah, a lot of them have, and become more activist and more worried about the message than the mechanics. The biggest issue is the name itself. No matter what Kobold puts on it, it isn't Dungeons and Dragons, so normies won't have a clue. They don't put D&D on it now. They put 5e, right? And so you just change people's. You got to change the people coming in, what their expectations are. You're inviting people to the table to play a role-playing game. If they're only going to come because it's labeled Dungeons and Dragons, you have to question whether or not that's the kind of player you want at your table to begin with. or if you bring them in with that game first, primarily, then say, well, you know what, next week we're going to run something different. And, once you've built that relationship with the players, if they refuse to play anything else, then you don't need that at your table. That's not somebody that's looking to expand their experience within the hobby. I mean, Gary Gygax came out and said in his books and his interviews and everything like that, you'll never be a good dungeon master if you're only running Dungeons and Dragons. You'll never be a good player if you only play one game. And he went into much more detail than that. If you're playing with the same group for 20 years, you're not going to be very good. If you're going to the same game shop to play, you're not going to be very good. Only if you're playing with different groups, different games, you go to different venues. He specifically mentioned, you have to play a convention in order to become a new level of good. The only thing I disagreed with what he was saying about game mastering, excuse me, is that you had to publish in order to reach the ultimate pinnacle of that. But for the most part, he's right. I mean, if you want to become well-versed and good at either running a role-playing game or playing a character in a role-playing game, you have to diversify. All right, let's see. They're putting out a video. Yeah, so that's why it's going to be on D&D Beyond at 3:00, I hear. Well, we'll see. Remember, do not fall into the trap of if they try to backtrack on it. They could come out and double down. You never know. But yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they say. Okay. Oh, that's just a text. If Brent, you're in the stream, I'll say, he asked the question, do you think OGL 1.1 will hold up in court? I don't think it's designed to go to court, but I don't think that it would. And I'm not a lawyer. I taught criminal justice for 1 year in high school, and while teaching that course, I learned a little bit about tort law and civil cases and everything, and doing mock trials and doing that kind of thing. I mean, I took courses in college for it as well. So my understanding is that what it could boil down to is the reasonable person standard in a civil court case. And under reasonable person standard, I mean, this is where you end up with, you can call things Band-Aid now, even though it's an adhesive bandage. A lot of companies lose their right to trademark naming just because the population as a whole misconstrues the product with the name. Go make me a Xerox copy. And no, it's a photocopy, but people for decades called it a Xerox copy. People for decades called it a Band-Aid. That's the case that stands out most to me, where Johnson & Johnson tried to sue and said, no, you can't call it Band-Aid, and the courts determined, well, reasonable person standard, basically people have used it so commonplace nomenclature that it is now no longer copyrighted. It's no longer trademarked or copyrighted. It becomes part of the common dialect, the common nomenclature, and so you can lose it. So yeah, I think that a judge could, and I'm answering a question that was texted to me. I think a judge could look at um, the terminology of in perpetuity and say a reasonable person would assume that that means forever, and so it could go that way, and that's why it's a risk. I think for it's a risk for WotC to let this go to a court. They'd rather just um, scare people off, scare companies off. And that's why it's good to see companies standing up and saying, no, we'll just remove it altogether, make some name changes and move forward without it. Yep. Yeah, let me get caught up again. Um, they might not want a lawsuit, but that's not likely the best move that the community as a whole can make to force their hand. No, I don't think it is either. I think, Joshua, that the best thing the community can do is to A, reject 1.1, which I think they clearly already have done. B is to, as another person put out there already, sign out of D&D Beyond. Or in my case, I've been telling people to, push against, seeing the movie. Let the movie tank. Send a real clear message to them that, hey, you really stepped in shit. Yes, it does. It does track. Yeah, it does track. Just Benia. Never let us to push their TTP archery and general realm with paradox like the ELC policy is pure greed. Yes, it's coming off as pure greed. I mean, it really is. And when people talk about the expression of, well, that's not a good look. I mean, that's a very modern, a modern terminology to use. A very modern mentality to have too. It's like it doesn't matter if you're, it doesn't matter so much if you're in the right, factually right. If it just looks bad. In many cases, that's, image has more to do with, correctness sometimes. And I'm not saying that that's, all the time positive or all the time negative. It really is situational, but it's a bad look, and it doesn't make them look. What it does is it makes them look untrustworthy, and that is almost an impossible thing to walk back from. Once you're labeled untrustworthy, you're freaking done. Who the hell is going to back you after that point? So I'm saying, whatever their thing is at 3:00, it's, unless it's a complete, mea culpa and really a new 1.1 that says we're not only taking 1.0a and we're including in it irrevocable in its language, and all the rest stays body the same way, just that they're including the word irrevocable, then I'd be like, okay, now at least we have something in writing that, if they just undercut their own arguments and say, no, we're just going back to this, we're sorry, we, whatever, but now we're going to include the word irrevocable in the old 1.1, 1.0a, and you're good to go from now on, then maybe they can bounce back from that. But they're not going to do that. I would be stunned, and I will come on and say, I apologize, I was wrong. You guys, you actually came out and you did the right thing and said the right thing and you move forward. I don't expect it, but I will do that if that's the case. And I think they will. I think they will, Joshua. I think that if it really came down to that, I know, let's say the first company is sued. The first company that's sued by WotC, they're going to throw up a GoFundMe to help defend themselves, and it's going to pick up a lot of people contributing. I certainly will contribute to that, but it's going to get a lot of contributions to it, and so no one company is going to have to face a lawsuit from Wizards of the Coast completely on their own. They will get support if they put it out there, and if they put their necks out in that degree, and I think that might actually shock Wizards of the Coast even more. That'll be putting the second foot in the pile of shit, because then they're going to realize, oh crap, you know what? This might actually end up being a longer thing than we thought it would be. But yeah, I think that anybody sticking their neck out will get supported. All right, let me get caught up again. Lots of comments, so I really do appreciate all the comments. I am not sure much of the player community is informed about OGL, but as a game master, I inform my groups. I am a GM about it and how WotC will affect future gameplay for them. Yeah, I mean they don't have to specifically know what the OGL. You can explain it in this way: open game license, and then what 1.1 is. It's not open. It is a very closed, and you can get into, when you write something with that with the intent that 1.1 was written, you can see that it is that it's not in good faith. And I don't think that any group of people seeing something done not in good faith is not going to come away with it with a bad taste in their mouth about that company. People, usually, I think they hate hypocrisy more than anything else. Like hypocrisy is actually worse than lying in many cases, or at least it certainly is received as, worse than lying in many cases. People hate hypocrites, and people hate not in good faith actors as well. Yes, but there's other ones other than that. Yeah, I mean, GoFundMe is not the only place that you can go. But yeah, I still don't think that they would have a problem raising it from any source they could do. They could just say, hey, here's a Patreon page. I know they can get political too. Here, Venmo me this, kind of thing. PayPal, set up a PayPal account. The OGL 1.A has a few features that make it imperative for WotC to limit any chance it goes to court. For example, no limits on jurisdiction, so 40 requests for declaratory judgment in 1 day. Yeah, like I said, that's getting beyond my understanding, of stuff. So, Zach G, I mean, yes, I think that WotC does not want this to go to court because of the risks that I say and possibly the risks that you're putting out there too. The one big advantage they have is that they have lawyers on retainer. They get paid whether they work or not. And that's not someone else that they're suing is not going to have that wherewithal unless they're also a mega corporation. But they know they can lose in court, and just running the risk of actually losing in court, they can end up losing far more than they could have potentially gained. Like I said, Johnson & Johnson suing over the Band-Aid, they never imagined that they would lose the trademark on the word Band-Aid. But if the people adopt the word as being commonplace, then it becomes commonplace. I mean, that was, it occurred far faster than public domain even works. Again, I'm going back. This was a case that came up in like the 80s or something like that. So it's going back a long, long way. And it did not take 75 years for them to lose that court case and to lose on the concept of the public adopting a particular term as part of a reasonable person standard aspect. I said this early on, Rational Ginger. If Critical Role has a different deal, it makes both Wizards of the Coast and Critical Role look bad. It makes Critical Role look selfish, all right, and not an industry beneficiary, and it makes Wizards of the Coast look weak in relationship to Critical Role. It really does say Critical Role is so important to Wizards of the Coast that Critical Role is going to get a special deal. I don't think that Wizards of the Coast want to try to hold on to the idea that they have. I don't think anybody else has it, that they have, that D&D made Critical Role and not the other way around. And I think that Critical Role, and I think many people do, recognize that Critical Role carried D&D for the last 3 to 5 years. Would you have had Stranger Things featuring D&D without Critical Role? Maybe not. I always thought Stranger Things, the kids should have been playing in 1983. They should have been playing Call of Cthulhu, which would have been more in line with what was going on than Dungeons and Dragons. But they were latching on to D&D. The writers of it were latching on to D&D. Maybe number one, they were playing that in 1983, and that might have been their thing. But also, D&D was popular because Critical Role brought it to that popularity. Again, my opinion. Only one court needs to grant an injunction against 1.1. Well, I don't think that, to be honest with you, the fact that they haven't released the full details of 1.1 and it's supposed to take effect tomorrow is an automatic injunction because they didn't give enough notice. Not enough official notice anyway. So regardless, I think that an injunction would automatically be issued just because of the timing of it. It takes effect tomorrow. They did not give proper notice because they haven't acknowledged that was the official release ahead of time. You can't say we're officially releasing it on a Friday and it takes effect on a Friday. Nothing is that immediate. Not when it involves this many other entities, let alone individuals. If Critical Role left D&D completely at this point and went on to run their own game, because really, Matthew Mercer is not running 5e. He's running such a modified version of 5e. It's really his own game. And don't be surprised if Critical Role comes out with their own fantasy role-playing game by 2024. If if they move, they take millions of followers with them. All right, and clearly that's a real possibility. So if there were only between 8 and 12 million players of D&D 5e right now, half of them are at least half of them are Critical Role. People brought in from Critical Role, and if they go, they will follow to whatever system Critical Role produces themselves. All right, and that's how popular they are. And to be honest with you, the best two hardcover books that WotC has produced in the last 5 years were both written by Matthew Mercer. So you have that going there. Everything else they've written in-house has been a disaster. Oh, wait. WotC dies. All right, so let me see if I got this right. If Critical Role stays the captive audience, that is the people that point into these, it's marketing. Yeah, WotC that is. I'm confused, Mike. Afternoon, Smug. With this new OGL, there's no other Critical Role like and emerge ever again. Yes, because they don't just deal with the new OGL doesn't just deal with people producing PDFs or print on demand tabletop role playing game supplements or adventures or even game systems. It's directed at Kickstarter. It's directed at video producers, whether it be on Twitch or YouTube. It's directed at cosplayers, which is probably why you haven't seen Ginny D do anything in 3 weeks. It's directed at anyone who is making money off of being adjacent to or directly attached to the OGL 1.0A. So any of those people, which covers from 5e on back, and it covers, in order to do anything for 6th edition, you have to sign on to the 1.1, and that doesn't exist yet. The 6th edition does not exist yet. It's still in testing phase. They don't have their VTT up yet. That's still being produced. They the only thing that they can create, Wizards of the Coast can create over the next year, let's say, is 5e content that's going to be obsolete before it hits the shelf. I don't think they don't need D&D to keep on growing their brand. Their brand is established. They could say, if just my opinion again, if Matthew Mercer said, the next cartoon series of Vox Machina, because the first one wasn't D&D, all right, the first one was still Pathfinder. He can come out and say the next one is going to be based on my own game system. All right. And there's going to be no community backlash against that. Who's going to backlash against it? People aren't going to say, oh, you're not doing D&D, I'm going to leave. No, they're there because they like the cast of characters and the cast of individuals doing Critical Role. It's not the game system. It's not like you can actually see the game system that they're playing. So no connection to it. Most critters don't actually play the game. They just watch the show. Yeah, Critical Role has produced 4 games this year, or at least have scheduled 4 games this year, 2023. One of them is a role-playing game, but it's not a fantasy role-playing game. One's a board game, one's a card game, and one's something else. So they're kind of hitting out. All of these are coming out of Darrington Press. And like I said, I fully expect that, and you haven't heard anything from Critical Role, you haven't heard anything from Matthew Mercer. I firmly expect that they're going to create a fantasy RPG and release it in 2024 to coincide with D&D's 50th anniversary. And they'll make a clean break from Wizards of the Coast. They'll have their own OGL, or they'll just have no OGL at all, and they'll just be creating for their own in-house game. They'd be smart to have an OGL, but they may not. He'd be stupid to take the deal, Mike. Matthew Mercer would only hurt himself if he takes the deal. It'll make him look like a sellout. It's not a win-win for both. Not in my opinion. It's not a win-win for both. They both lose. Mercer loses. The fan base is going to look at him and say, you sold out. Wizards of the Coast loses because they're admitting that they can't move forward without Mercer. They might as well make Mercer the head of D&D game design, at that point. The biggest obstacle to WotC's, WotC gaining money is how they proceed forward with their monetization efforts. If they look draconian, or act draconian, I should say, if they act draconian, if they, if they leave a bad taste in people's mouths, they're not going to make money. I'll play a game that has microtransactions because that's what the game is advertised to have. That's what the game is supposed to have, and those microtransactions are almost always cosmetic. They might sometimes be quality of life kind of things, like added vault space or more character slots or things like that. Like every MMO, if you're used to MMOs, you're used to this kind of stuff. But what Wizards of the Coast is trying to do is they're trying to monetize something that has never been monetized that way before. And at the same time saying, we're not creating a new video game, but that's exactly what they're doing. All right. So they're coming off as being disingenuous at the same time. They're not being honest and they're being disingenuous. They're not being transparent at all. And that's, they're trying to play every single angle at the same time. And it's coming off as bullshit. And that's the obstacle to them making money, is they look like bullshit artists that you can't trust. That's right, Ducato. They couldn't even tell you what edition of D&D they're playing. And I haven't looked at it in a long time. Does Critical Role even mention what game system they're playing? I think they just play. I don't think that they mention what game system they're playing. I've seen bits and pieces of it, Rational Ginger. I watched the first season of Vox Machina, and it was okay. It was better than I thought it would be. And that's the best thing that I could say about it was better than I thought it was going to be, but it's not like something that I was sitting there like, oh, I can't wait until season 2 comes out. I mean, I'll probably still watch it, but it's not something that I'm like, I can't wait. Not like other series that I was really locked into. And I'm kind of in the same place with Stranger Things right now as well. I mean, first of all, I don't think season 5 is coming out for like another year or more. I'll probably have lost all interest in it by that point. Yep. It's always a possibility. I've been hearing more positive things about Pathfinder 2. I think initially it had a terrible rollout, but maybe because 5e is becoming so crappy over time that people have been looking at Pathfinder 2e again. It's a game people already know about, and it's better than 5e. Yeah, and I guess they'll start to realize that even more so. Okay. I wonder how big of a boost Pathfinder 2e is gonna get with this. I think they all will. I'm sure Pathfinder 2 will pick up some. I think more so. I think more so. Troll Lord Games and Kobold Press and Frog God and some of the other creators are going to get a lot more out of it than maybe Pathfinder. But yes, Pathfinder I think will pick up some of those that walk away. And a lot of people, a good portion of people are just going to stick to playing 5e in person with their books and not move on to 6e. Of all the possibilities, I did a video, a week or two ago about this. Of all the possibilities that people have available to them, only one of those possibilities is moving on to 6e. The other possibility is to stay with 5e. One is to leave the hobby altogether. One of them is to, go to one of the other alternates, whether it be OSR, or develop, finally develop their own game system, or just an amalgamation of all the game systems around them and kind of bring it together and just homebrew, straight up homebrew. So all of those possibilities, only one has a certain segment of the population moving to Pathfinder. I'm sorry, not Pathfinder, moving to 6e or the virtual tabletop of D&D Beyond. I think that's less than 50%. All right, move on to it. I think it's an ever shrinking number, and this going on now doesn't help that at all. In Wizards of the Coast favor. The new OGL specifically doesn't apply to anything outside of books or PDF, but that isn't benign. Instead, those forms of creativity aren't covered. The new OGL, no, they are. 1.1, not in their original statement, in question and answer kind of thing, or FAQ, I should say, but in the 1.1 released or leaked of the 1.1, it does cover those things outside of books and PDFs. It specifically covers cosplay, it covers video, it covers VTT assets. So it covers a lot more than just books and PDF. It applies to a lot more than that. That's why there's such an uproar. If you just covered those two things, people that are doing YouTube channels and people that are cosplaying wouldn't give a crap. But they do now because they monetize that. And here's Wizards of the Coast saying, well, you're cosplaying as a druid, and druid is part of the 1.0 OGL, and you made $60,000 with your cosplay and calendar sales, or this or that, with your images and everything, and you owe us 25%. Don't think that their rule is locked in at 750,000 or less is exempt from it. No, they can change the conditions of it at any time, without justification. They can just step in and say, oh, that 750 is now $75,000. All right, and remember, it was $750,000 income, not gross, not net, not profit, total revenue. And that's one of the real fallback or pitfalls of it. Let's see. No backlash in favor of OGL accessibility versus accessibility for new viewers. I'm trying to figure out where that's coming from too. All right, let's see. Brands attrition. If you aren't growing, you're shrinking. Yeah, I'm trying to follow along, Mike. And I apologize if I'm missing parts. You're in the 1%. Most of the fan base doesn't know anything about this or doesn't care beyond virtual signaling. All right, well, that may be so. Yeah, I think there's a lot to catch up on your comments, Mike. And I apologize for it. Like I said, it's hard to keep up with that. Let's see. What does Nerd Immersion just put out a video with another leak from Hasbro, allegedly from WotC employee. All right. I'll have to catch that too. And I am going to wrap this thing up in a few minutes as well, because if there is going to be a release at 3:00, I want to give everybody an opportunity to go check it out. And I certainly will take a look at Nerd Immersions. Actually, I could bring that up here and see. I see someone else put out a video as well. You're in the way of our money. That was Dungeon Delver. Let's see. Nerd Immersion. Nerd Immersion, first one. Wow. All right. So he put this up an hour ago. The thumbnail says, hit WotC where it hurts, D&D Beyond. Cancel your D&D Beyond subscription, Nerd Immersion. All right. So he's all in. All right. He's definitely all in as far as, let's hit him. Let's hit him where it goes. And that is absolutely something that I will I will certainly back. And let's see, even before I watch it all, I'm going to like it. I am going to put in the obligatory hashtag boycott honor among thieves as well. Okay, so I put my boycott honor among thieves as well. So yep, let's hit them where it hurts. And hopefully that is the way that we can as a community respond. So it says, the leak from WotC Insider said D&D Beyond subs fall off is what they were looking at to gauge monetary impact of backlash. All right. So we're definitely going to hit it there. And we're going to hit them on the movie. And hopefully we'll keep on hitting them regardless of what they say at 3 o'clock today. And we make sure that, the shit isn't just on the sole of their shoe, but it's on the very top of it as well. And, and all throughout for the remainder of the time frame that it takes for them to not just step away from the old, not just step away from 1.1, but want an affirmation that OGL 1.0A, maybe they should just do a 1.0B, and in B, add irrevocable as an attachment to 1.0A, and leave it at that. Just a one-word change, irrevocable, and we're good to go going forward from there. So make them pay. I'm going to leave it there. My group has 4 DMs, 3 plan to stick with 5e but modify it. I moved on to Castles and Crusades. Yes, I know you moved on to Castles and Crusades, and once my AD&D first edition campaign comes to an end, I'm kind of anticipating at least another 40 weeks on it. And then I will try to move all of my players, my current players, over to a different system. And that will most likely be Castles and Crusades. And it's going to be geared up very much the same way as a multi-year campaign. After about 40 sessions, my new campaign will be well over another 40 sessions. My new campaign will be over the 2-year mark. And I think that their characters will have run the course. They should be in the 12 to 14 range by that point. And we'll see about that. And then I'll make the break. I mean, I will still always love TSR D&D, and always be up for playing it or doing one-shots with it. But I think long-term, it's best to move on to Castles and Crusades for my fantasy tabletop role-playing games, and and whatever else comes down the pike for. I'm waiting on Mothership, the full box set, to come sometime soon. I think they're running a little bit late, but once I get that, I'm going to roll with that. So I'm going to wrap this up, give everybody about 20 minutes to prepare for the 3 o'clock announcement, if that actually takes place. And I'm going to check out the video from Nerd Immersion and check that out as well. So, hey, everybody, thanks for joining. Please consider giving it a thumbs up so that it gets that algorithm out there. If you hadn't subscribed, please consider subscribing. You can follow me on Twitter as well. This is live streaming onto Twitter. So at Bloodwolf is my Twitter tag, and then Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review is on YouTube, and Edward James Bloodworth, but it always goes to Unscreen Gaming, parentheses OSG, parenthesis close parenthesis, and that's there on Facebook as well. I'll link to the announcement channel. Anyone? I guess you're thinking of that. Let me do the link to my channel. And I will wrap up there. So here is the link to Unscripted and Unchained RPG Review. If you haven't subscribed, please consider subscribing. You could just click on that. I thought they were supposed to be shorter than that. But anyway, that'll bring you right there. Subscribe. Like this video. It should go live sometime soon if you're not watching it already on either Facebook or Twitter. So again, enjoy the rest of your afternoon. Here's crossing our fingers and hoping that this moves along in a positive way. Always my hope that it moves positively. And remember, boycott Honor Among Thieves and drop your D&D Beyond account. Have a good one, everyone.